March 9th at 6:03. Roll call. Randy?
Greg.
Here.
Max Weiss.
Here.
Ken Jones.
Here.
Mike Babbitt.
Here.
Krista Hoover.
Krista's absent so far. Approval of regular agenda.
Move to approve the regular agenda. Second.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes will be at the next meeting. Communications by visitors. We have visitors. Anybody want to talk to us? Mr. Fernapple.
Good evening, Mark Fraffel with Shoreside Petroleum. As you know, we're interested in a floating fuel dock and have been talking to both the harbor and Mark Keller. We've put a letter of interest in with the city to put a floating fuel dock into the harbor. So we have a meeting with the owners of Shoreside Petroleum and Mark Keller on Friday to discuss kind of options available for the North Fill or the North Harbor Improvement PID grant. Is that right, Tony? PID?
Yep.
The new grant, and coming up with a memorandum of understanding with the city of Cordova to put a floating fuel dock into the harbor. So I am here tonight to answer any questions that you guys have on maybe what we're looking at for installation, and then we'll kind of narrow that down once we decide on a location for the dock. So any questions, I'll be here. I don't know if I can answer them, but we'll try.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay. Harbor Masters report, Tony? You guys been busy?
Yep, busy with meetings. So, meetings with Mark Keller and Robin, with Sam Curtis. We've talked with Marad with the RAISE grant on options for not financing, funding, and what we got to do to get them to keep giving us all the money. So we're still talking with them. Mike Fisher, Northern Economics, is finishing up the fee assessment in the harbor. And then we had a conference call with the team at R&M Geotech study, so they're still working on getting that figured out when they're going to come up and actually do the study. Let's see, what else is important? So we do have John Hutchins is the new supervisor of the harbor department. Been training him on the lift, along with, he's been doing a lot of small little projects, getting stuff taken care of that's lost in the past years. So he did do his first lift the other day on Monday and did really good. I mean, I just kind of stood by and helped him out, talked him through it, and get him doing another 10 or so, and I think he'll have it, probably less than that, but just we'll see how it goes. He's doing well at that. And Alpine Diesel completed the steering bearing replacement and hydraulic adjustments on the travel lift for the travelers. And let's see, we got water in the harbor finally. And completed one of the finger floats. Still got to go back in the water, but we finished rebuilding that one over on K-Float. And installed the new door in the men's room that someone ripped off. It's really nice until fishing season, we'll see. And let's see. Yeah. That's about it. If there's any questions, anything that's pertinent.
Dumpster enclosure, so that's still like the only town-wide kind of open dumpster that's available for people, or
Well, I mean, the baler's open
Baylor's open?
Monday through Saturday. So,
Right.
till 3:30. But, yeah.
But through the winter, we take a hit on,
We take, you take a hit all the
Non-harbor.
time, but yeah. Yeah. So.
all right. New business. Port Infrastructure Development Plan, grant discussion. So we had a short meeting the other day to talk about some of the things, and Curtis, you want to speak to this
Yeah, this Curtis is going to
you have
speak to this. So,
drawing here that looks familiar?
Yeah, so I'm Curtis, the grants guy for the city. I've met most of you. But the PID NOFO, which is the Notice of Funding Opportunity, is out for this year. They've bumped it forward 2 months to May 16th is the deadline this year, which is a lot earlier than we were expecting. So we're going to need to move faster on that than we originally anticipated. The thrust of PID is all about improving safety and efficiency of intermodal transportation of goods, so loading, unloading of goods, but it's reasonably broad with how it relates to the harbor. Robert Bouchard, the Alaska rep, is pretty receptive to most things we've thrown at them so far, but the primary difference from Raise, which you guys are all more familiar with, I think, is there's no quality of life component. So you can make economic arguments, safety arguments, but to say that we're going to put in this park here or something to that effect because it will make Cordova a nicer place to live really doesn't get you any points whatsoever. So that's an important distinction to keep in mind. From the perspective of the city, I think the important project components are repairing where the road is sloughing on Breakwater Ave. That's getting worse and worse and will continue to get worse. And the way to fix that is probably some sort of sheet piling and a bulkhead built down there. That can also fix the parking situation, which is one of the other big priorities. We obviously need a lot more parking down there, and we need a much safer route for pedestrians. It's just super congested, as you all know, in the summer, and sheet piling and a bulkhead with a walking path there would sort of knock out all three of those problems at once if it's designed correctly. We're working with P&D on some preliminary designs. What you have in front of you is obviously not an engineer's design and is sort of deliberately coarse at this point so that we can hear what you guys have for input and put all of that into a more refined design as we move forward here. The floating fuel dock is obviously another priority, which you all have spoken about, but it is particularly important in this project basically because we are spending most of the harbor's debt capacity with the South Harbor project, but a private investment match can count as the match for the grant and make us eligible for it. So I think without that level of private investment, we can't get these other project components that are important, or at least not until the harbor is able to rebuild its reserve fund and probably go out for another bond. So if we're able to stack a floating fuel dock into this project, we can move a lot quicker on that side of it. Also, our environmental consultant for Raise is including the North Harbor in not necessarily a floating fuel dock, but the North Harbor and sheet piling over there as part of the NEPA and environmental work for the South Harbor rebuild. So when we do turn this grant around, we can say, hey, look, this really long and arduous environmental permitting process is already complete. And so we can move a lot faster. And that makes it a much more attractive application at the federal level. So that sets us up really well to put in a competitive application. Beyond that, I'm here to listen to your feedback and what you would like to see incorporated into the project. Maybe this can be a back and forth. If I hear something that doesn't sound like it's a good fit for their funding priorities, I can say that, and otherwise just take notes and listen to all of you.
yeah.
So I had a couple ideas. I sent out a little sketched on image before the meeting just so you guys would have a visual of what I'm talking about. But so one thing that I noticed that was missing out of this, Curtis, is just another little green square where the Fisherman's Memorial Park is, just because we don't really want to pave over the top of it.
Yep.
It's kind of already existing. But not that that wins us any points, like you said. do really like this idea of putting cranes on the bulkhead there. I think that's phenomenal. One thing that I guess wanted to point out is as we move forward with mariculture in our community and like push that as an industry, the need for heavier duty cranes is going to go up. When you're unloading large totes of kelp, there's a good chance that that's going to be higher capacity than say like a 1,500 ton crane. I know when you're trying to unload big bags of halibut and stuff like that, we actually have to do smaller picks with the existing cranes. And so other communities like Valdez and Homer and Seward have gone to 5-ton cranes. And I think that would be an ideal location because we could bury a cement footer and put it in dirt and actually anchor it into ground instead of trying to put it on the out of a pier where it's going to tear it apart. So that's like a really good location for that. And I think that might be able to win you some points with the grant people. The location of the floating fuel dock, obviously everybody knows I want a floating fuel dock. I personally feel like the better location would be where the U.S. Forest Service dock is. Obviously that's open for discussion still. But I think if we could double the amount of crane space and put in one big crane and one little crane or 2 big cranes, I think that might win us a few more points as far as the transportation of goods, like what this grant is all about. So, and really play on the whole kelp and seafood component, I would say. Yeah, other than that, it looks great. I like having the commercial space. I like the walking path. The only concern I would have about the Park Harbor viewing space is that's a major snow dump area. So whatever park or viewing space we put in, we want to make sure we leave enough room for a loader to go dump snow next to it.
I'll touch on one additional note that was asked actually before the meeting started. The commercial space, what we're thinking at this moment, would really just be planning ahead. We'd stub in utilities and make it available for pop-up businesses in the short term, but also with an eye for it to be planned around building brick and mortar, whether that's 5, 10, 15 years down the road, if money popped up to do that. And I have no idea where that pool of money would come from, but just looking towards the long-term development of that area as you design it seems smart.
And we're looking at a city leased.
Yeah, correct.
So I guess one thing on that note, would it improve our odds to include that the north breakwater lot that we currently have short-term leases on? I know the city has heard in the past from people who have done the short-term summer rentals out there that they would like, more utilities stubbed in. Particularly the coffee shop wanted a water line and a sewer line at one point. And, we got them electrical when I was on council last, but we never did get them the rest. Is that something that would win us some more points if we were able to get a couple of commercial spaces out there, or does that kind of negligible?
Yeah, there is an economic vitality component of the grant, which those additional spaces would probably be factored into the cost-benefit analysis we submit. At the same time, the comprehensive plan makes pretty clear that, well, it mentions using that area for like congregant food truck parking, among other things. It also discusses public green space, which would certainly have to be a part of that design. Mm-hmm. Frankly, given that it's due May 16th, I worry a little bit about sufficient community vetting for that lot, which seems to be complicated, but maybe if P&Z and Kevin, the planner, can come up with a plan that satisfies everyone, I think it could feasibly be incorporated into this. I'd also just like to keep an eye on the timeline and make sure we get out something competitive this year. And I don't frankly think that it will help the grant a ton, because it'll be 2 commercial lots at the end of the day. So the impact of a floating fuel dock and the impact of getting pedestrians off these important sort of routes for the canneries transport will really be the heart of the project. And if that works out such that we can add it on top, I think it would be great. Mm-hmm. But from my perspective right now, I don't see it as a central part of the project or necessarily a priority.
Okay.
Excuse me. On On this one drawing, it shows the fuel dock coming off right through the science center. Is that in the plan that to take the science center out of there?
If it was in that location, yeah, it would
Okay.
involve demoing the science center. I don't know enough about locations for the fuel dock. That's your guys' purview, but an upside that I'll note of building that into this grant would be that whatever fuel provider would win the RFP for a floating fuel dock would likely eat the demo cost of the science center, which I've seen is noted as a long-term priority of the Harbor Commission in your master plan, and it will be probably reasonably expensive over water. So that is a piece to think about.
Krista, welcome. Any questions on the North Harbor plan? It's,
No, sorry I was late. I had a
That's
call
fine.
that ran long that I couldn't cut off.
One thing that I was going to mention was I think we were talking about putting cranes like in the corner, or putting a like smaller crane for gill nets and stuff in the corner by fishing game, like on that bulkhead there.
Yeah, so that is part of the 2021 PID design we submitted, had a net mending float there, which requires dredging that back channel and revetment along that whole slope. It would obviously be good. Tony's expressed some concerns about congestion, which seems valid. It's also pretty expensive for one float back there by the time you need to dredge that whole channel and add revetment along that wall. But maybe to put the walking path there, you already need to do some sort of slope support, which would make it cheaper. That gets into some pretty specific engineering questions, I think. But if that is a priority of the Harbor Commission, that for that space, I can pass that along to Chip and whoever else is working on the project.
I don't know if I remember right, but I didn't remember there being a float there, but just a crane on the bulkhead so that you could tie your boat up there and lift, stuff back and forth there.
We had a little float there too.
Oh,
Yeah. I think in my opinion, if you're gonna put the cranes over by like that yellow spot now, you wouldn't really need to do that. And maybe we could look at a little floating fuel dock, net mending float there or something, but yeah. I think.
Mr. Chair.
yeah.
So while we're on the topic of floating fuel dock, I think that's definitely a huge component that's kind of missing out of both of these plans, the South Harbor reconstruction and the PIDP. And so I would love for us to come up with a location suitable. If we do not, if we don't put the floating fuel dock where the Forest Service float is, that would be a great location for relocating the airplane / net mending float. I don't know if this one could be hauled out and then fixed up and then put back in, or if it would be building a new one. But the gillnet fleet is gonna suffer when we get rid of the airplane float, I feel like, because the amount of congestion on that drive down. I know some net mending will be able to occur, but I don't know if it's going to be quite what the gillnet fleet's used to. So that is, I guess, one concern of mine moving forward with both of these plans is the loss of net mending space. So I would like to offer, like, if we don't move the floating fuel dock, then let's put it there. And we're losing the airplane dock. And as far as movement of goods out to the hatcheries and stuff, that's a pretty essential part, or it has been in the past, not necessarily the last couple of years, but herring fishing and other things. I do feel like we need to at least have maybe like 1 or 2 airplane stalls, maybe not 4. I don't know if there's any way to incorporate that. And maybe it'll win us points, maybe it won't. I don't know. Just an idea.
So you're thinking that somewhere in that corner,
Well, if we put the floating
Between-
fuel dock where it's pictured, then just right where the Forest Service dock is, we could just tow the, I mean, maybe not the existing one, but we can just put it right over there and tie it into the loading dock. And that would be the new airplane float and the new net mending float.
okay, possibly adding an airplane float and net mending area to that corner. Any other things, people?
I mean, I don't know, maybe having the airplane component, I know it's not really a huge thing for our community anymore, but maybe it would win us some points as far as, transported goods, I guess was what I was thinking. Because in the winter, the lake freezes over. It's the only way that the airplanes can take off on water to go to the hatcheries. We can use that to our advantage, maybe.
Right now, we're pretty much leaving the plane on the beach and launching at the boat launch, kind of.
Yeah, they've cut way back. I mean, before there was that
Yeah.
plane in there all winter, but with how everything's gone lately, it's cut way back. But I would hate to see that piece of infrastructure go away completely and not be replaced. So
And we used to tie planes up in the slips.
Yeah, that's what I understood, is most of them went in the slips. I mean,
during herring fishing, yeah. Now guys are running amphibs and just land on the beach.
Do we have a renewed lease with the Forest Service?
No.
yeah, not that I
Still
know of, but
in limbo?
I have not heard that we have a new one yet.
I talked to Helen on Monday and she said no.
Any other things? that-
Well, the only other thing is over where this shows yellows for the cranes, that means it's right across the ramp for that grid. Does that mean you're tearing that whole grid ramp and everything out, if that goes in?
Yes.
That brand new dock almost?
Yeah. Well, just the decking. The only person that says no is Mike.
It's a good grid. I don't know why you want to get rid of a good grid.
So
I just think
besides the
you put a lot of
grid-
money in that a couple of years, or a year ago, or a couple of years.
Yeah,
We can save the decking.
besides the
Leave it
grid,
there.
what else could we use that pier for besides the
Well, if
grid?
they're gonna build.
It's a great
cranes,
grid.
Grid.
We'll get rid of the pier and just leave the grid.
Yeah, that's fine.
Nothing to tie up to. Doesn't matter with you.
I can sit flat.
Yeah, I know.
Perfect.
So is removing that grid generally okay with people, or will that be a big problem?
right? He's the only one who uses it.
There's like 5 people that use it.
I personally have gone back and forth on it a couple of times. We did just put $200,000 into that approach, so I don't want to just go in there with an excavator and tear it all out. I'd like to do it carefully and salvage all those boards. You're always going to lose the labor component, but there is some good lumber there that's only a couple years old.
Yeah.
The grid itself is in pretty bad condition. It's caused some liability issues for the harbor department. I would say it's probably time to exit the grid business. It's taking business away from our travel lift, and if we want to manage the harbor enterprise fund as a business, we want to drive business to our more expensive option. I mean, that's how I run my sales. Why would you let somebody buy something for $75 when they could buy it for $1,500? So,
Wow.
well, we want to.
Let's just say we still will, we're still maintaining the.
There's
other-
still another
yeah,
grid. There's
which-
still an
which
alternative,
is
cost-effective
solid
option,
and will,
and the more
and it can handle boats that can't come out at the.
yeah, but this grid can't. It's limited to 40 footers. Most of the 40-foot and under boats in town are trailerable, and I think that there is a higher purpose for that area that can be utilized by more of the fleet than what that grid is being utilized for. And I do think we want to drive more business through our travel if it's going to bump our numbers up and look better when we go to upgrade the shipyard. We can get over 200 lifts a year. It's not going to be a bad thing.
Any more people want to hate on the grid on the other side? Is there anybody else?
To go on there anymore. I'd like to go over there,
I'm
though.
gonna keep a tally this summer because I think a lot more people use it
Yeah,
than people
I was
realize.
gonna ask, do we really know how many people use it?
Well,
Yeah.
Randy would know, right? I mean, you have to sign up for it.
We don't differentiate when we charge it out, and that's the
Oh.
only thing that tracks it. We just charge it as grid.
Quite often it's a few bow pickers, and then, yeah, not a lot of even seiners use it. But I think we had a houseboat on it there last year. Yeah.
Okay. So if that approach was taken down, we would have a bulkhead that would house maybe 2 cranes, and then going towards that corner. Mark, I guess since you're here, we're talking about fuel docks. Is that what you envision? A straight shot or a T, or has it got any ideas on?
Based upon the location that was given by Mr. Keller, we kind of went through and looked at the availability and what kind of fuel dock that we would put in there. And in the picture that you guys have of Juneau has Auk Bay on it, and if you look here at the end, this is a floating fuel dock on this finger here. That's somewhat what it would look like, or what we envision would look like for the Cordova Harbor. So ultimately, what we're requesting, or what we would like, is something that can service at least 4 bow pickers, right? So realistically, the big scheme of things, the picture that you would need to know is, with the exception of very few boats, maybe Andy's tugboat and the Pacific Sojourn and a couple other boats, that all of the boats in the harbor would be able to be serviced by the fuel dock. That's the kind of footprint that you need to look at for the floating fuel dock, what we're looking at having. So when you scale that, it doesn't leave a lot of options for a whole lot of additional space. If you were to move it to the Forest Service area, then you still have the same footprint, though you have all of the area behind it that would be available to be used. You just have to look at maneuvering, right? So the seiners would have to get in there, would be able to move around and get through that area, but that would be, you know, the biggest bulk of the area that we would need would be in an area that size. So figure four bow pickers, probably 85 to 105 feet in length.
And then it would be nice to have at low tide, 10, 12-foot depth would be nice.
Yeah, I mean,
Could do a little less at big low tide if you had to, but you could stay out with your bigger boats, I guess. Go ahead.
I guess, so I've got a question for both Curtis and Mark. As far as, you know, evaluating locations for a fuel dock, does the timeline of shovel readiness play into this grant, Curtis? And then I guess the part for Mark would be, do you feel like you could move on the Forest Service location quicker than the other ones?
I think that it would probably be a partnership more than quicker or not, based upon the fact that, you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put a floating fuel dock, build in, bring your piles in, do all that stuff, and then 3 months later have a dredge come in and be putting sheet piles and dredging behind you. So I think that the space is limited enough that you would have to time the project to work together. It just is too small of a space to try to, you know, be driving piles while you're dredging.
I just wasn't sure because you said the timeline's so short. Like, do we need to have the funds available for the match? Pulling the trigger here pretty quick if we were to be selected.
Yeah, I think there's no way we'll have funds available from a private investor. Ideally, we'll have MOUs from more than one fuel provider, and those MOUs will essentially say something to the effect of they will submit a proposal on a project that is outlined to contain these components, and what exactly those components are is a discussion that still needs to be narrowed and had, obviously. But there's no way that, I mean, a project this size will need to be RFP'd, and there's no way that we can get through an RFP process before the grant is due. So I think an MOU, as Mark touched on earlier, will be the right solution.
It's a pretty volatile market right now to try to get a project, planned and initiated and accomplished, and we're already in March. So, I mean, you're looking at realistically the end of 24, maybe 23.
When you get a price quote that's good for 36 hours?
Yeah, not even, mostly it's today. I need to know today.
Yeah.
And the fuel surcharge to get it all here.
Yeah, I need to know today. Yeah, there's no fuel surcharge.
It's worth noting off that 23-24 timeline, though, that that's likely the construction season South Harbor rebuild will occur during. So there's a lot of potential to work with mobilization costs and stuff and have the grants even overlap, and potentially the same contractor who bids on the South Harbor rebuild might be able to offer a lower bid on part of the PID project because they're already mobilized here. I don't know exactly how that will work out, but it will likely save the city money if those two timelines did overlap.
It probably doesn't pertain to this, but is the timeline for the South Harbor still kind of online with what you were talking about, that sheet we had? Or
23, 24.
Maybe start in May and work through 24?
Yeah, if we did it, it's going to be 23, 24, and it will be October to April.
October to April.
Yeah. Yeah. When there's less boats in the harbor.
So it got bumped back a year.
What's that?
So it got bumped back a year.
We just no way we're going to get everything done. Even permitting was going to get us way beyond, most likely, so.
Yeah, I think environmental permitting are big hang up on that timeline. We're
Yeah.
probably not going to be through it until November. And trying to get the project done in one season, starting in November rather than October, is probably a deal breaker.
Any more discussion on the PID? Any other things anybody wants to make sure are in there, or concerns? All right,
Don't think so.
Thank you, Curtis.
thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Curtis.
One thing, just as a reminder about Mark Keller being here.
Tomorrow, right?
Yeah, and so he's going to do it at 5 o'clock, question and answer here in this room, right? Yeah, so.
You guys, so Mark Keller, the project manager, will be here tomorrow night,
Yeah.
taking all questions.
Yeah, so.
On the South Harbor project, not the PID, right?
Right.
He's here for that.
Well, there's been a lot of questions, so I figure we'll look it through, and I know Kenny mentioned the Ts on the ends. That has been brought up to Mark Keller. I mean, that's always, is, I think, a great idea. It's going to be a funding issue that, right now we're short, so can we afford to do it? Or can we engineer it to at least be done at a later date, instead of just corking ourselves, we'll not be able to do it. So, yeah, we have brought up, Curtis and I and Sam, when we talked to Mark Keller, and then we have brought that up, and so, yeah.
So we have page 4 and 5 here, Tony.
Well, 5 shows another issue, another thing Kenny brought up is about the covered area that was talked about before, but yeah, we kind of went away from that with the conceptual on due to funding and everything like that, so.
So this,
4 gives
The other one was the one
full
that,
bulkhead with the,
number 3 is the one we're planning on then, kind of, right? Page 3?
4,
Oh, it's got the adult dock in it yet, okay.
yeah. North Harbor is page 3. 4 is South Harbor.
I thought we were talking about getting rid of the one against the breakwater and going back.
I mean, it could be a
5.
possibility, we don't, I mean,
Okay,
yeah, I mean, R&M is gonna walk the docks and everything, go through everything, and they're gonna set out that RFP, and then we'll start getting ideas from everyone else, and I mean, it's all gonna get vetted, and it's gonna come to us, and planning and council, and so, but
Getting so many pictures, I gotta figure which one we're on.
just pick one.
I guess I understand how it would be a little bit of an additional cost to tee off the ends, but if you just engineer the end, I mean, there's already floats going off each side of the end, and then there's a pillar sticking out in the middle. Just re-engineer those end, maybe not extend it, just the last ones would be teed. I actually feel like there would be a little bit of cost savings on some of that useless material out there that you can't even tie to. And then your only cost would be adding maybe an additional piling
Yeah, I mean,
to brace it for larger boats.
yeah, you'd probably have to put 3 pilings, each end and one in the middle or something. Yeah, I mean, that's an engineer that's going to have to figure that out.
Yeah, or even
And
2 on each end and then a couple in the middle. But
Yeah, so,
I do think that one of the huge glaring things missing out of this whole project is a space to park a 100-foot vessel. And we've got a couple of those that are owned by local people, and they have approached us before in the past looking for a place in the harbor, and we don't have anything for them because of the age of our float structure. And while we may be able to accommodate some of them with a new float structure, it just seemed like I really want to make sure we get it included. I understand it might cost a little bit more, but I don't see how it's going to cost like a huge amount more just if you engineer it ahead of time that way. So.
yeah, like I said, I mean, that's going to be an engineer decide, try to figure out what that cost. I mean, steel is the expensive part, and pile and driving pile. So I think, they're $10,000 or were $10,000 a pile. So you're probably at 15,000 per pile and then driving it. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea. I mean, I think we gain those big stalls as long as we're not losing other stalls. So,
Yeah, I just think there's already going to be a pile supporting the end. There's already going to be a pile on the each end of each finger. So there's already 3 piles on the end of each float structure. It's just if you design it in a way, it makes it where it's a parkable space. I don't, it's like, yeah, maybe you might have to add a pile just so you can support a big 100-footer or something. But the pieces are already there. You just got to make the Legos go in a way that makes it usable instead of unusable.
yeah, and that's one thing I had mentioned, we talked to Mark Keller, is that if nothing else, if there's a part that we can't afford to replace in that project, we engineer it so we can, even though it's expensive to mob and demob, next year or the year after, when there's another project going on, and we can forethought, kind of like Curtis was talking about with those commercial spaces. They could be brick and mortar someday. The other one is that G-float, with the new G-float and strong and everything, we could potentially put people there for at least time being.
Yeah, I guess the boats that I had in mind are like the big Bering Sea crabbers. I think we could probably fit some of the landing crafts in on G, but I know 2 landing crafts that want to come here that currently can't, and then there's at least 2 of those big crabbers that local owners, and they don't park them here because we don't have a space. So
It is part of our harbor that I think is underutilized, the very ends of the floats. Like there's room, there's always extra room. There's not much room in between them, but there's extra room out there.
As long as they don't cut off the floats just inside of that.
Maybe, yeah, maybe not on K.
Well, I guess I was thinking on K, it wouldn't be like a big crabber, but you could put a seine boat on the end.
Yeah.
Somebody who has one of those outer gillnet stalls, it might be a dual permit holder, could park a seiner out there, and he'd probably be happy as a clam at high tide about it. So.
Yeah, or on K, it could even just extend out more, so there would be. And so in this plan, we have K having slips only on the east side.
Is that L or is it
Yeah, it's technically the new L.
L, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be the new L. The one that's good, Mike.
It seems like it would be a lot easier to park the boats and stuff if the finger floats went angled the other way on that float too.
Wait a minute, what? No.
Seriously.
Yep, and all of
Yeah,
them. It should be-
and then you don't gotta go around all the way.
Fish boat.
Yeah, it'd be a lot easier to go in and out that way.
All the floats like that on the wind side. Yeah, so you're gonna have to make a U-E almost.
Well, I think right now they're all straight, aren't they?
On K and J,
And then the other ones are angled.
a little bit, I think, if I remember right, yeah.
So is this the one where we have one more extra?
Yep.
I thought we decided not to do that.
Well, we haven't decided technically anything yet until we decide on if we're going to get funding, so.
I think that was one of that was
Oh,
lower
I thought it
priority.
was a way
Yeah,
for
it's
us
a-
to save money was to go
always a
with the
possibility.
existing footprint, not do that
Yeah,
extra one.
when we decided on priorities,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, I think that's, yeah, I think we should preserve the amount of space we have between our main float structures. We shouldn't get closer together.
That's why they're putting only one side, because they're moving that whole thing over 30 feet, probably. You don't have room on the side of it now to put stalls. If you do that with that one-sided one, you've got six rows of floats there.
Yeah, no, I think that, and then that would save us a bunch of money.
Is there any way we could make those 20-foot slips on M float 30-foot slips?
Yeah, I mean, that would be my suggestion anyways, because 20 foot is just not a need for it.
And then what do we decide for the blank spot over there by the harbor master office?
The blank spot?
Where there's no 20-foot slips in this picture, it's just a big blank. Is that cruise ship lightering? Is that what that was thought of?
Yeah, I mean, that's also a transient dock. Yeah,
Transit, okay.
yeah. Yeah, in front of the parking lot kind of area?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, but it would be good for a lightering area too, so, yeah.
I feel like there's a slip missing where the Aucklet currently parks, right at the end of that drive down. Is that on purpose for maneuvering area to access that side of the drive down?
It looks like they spaced it a little bit differently. I don't know if they technically moved it in this drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't know, I'd have to recount them, but
Yeah,
Yeah, like it could be,
It should have one.
there could
could
be
be a little
one.
closer to the drive down float without really screwing anything up and still have a
Yeah, because you're not going to be really bringing a seiner into that part of the drive down float anyway. I don't.
drop off
more
zone.
of
We
like a-
already got the outside. Why do you need the inside?
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I thought that the drive down was like more like the airplane float sitting next to the ramp. I didn't realize that the drive down was gonna be the actual dock for that corner.
It will land on it.
Yeah, kind of like in Sitka, it's the rest of the float structure is connected to the drive down. Yeah, it's super convenient.
basically it's a ramp and the drive down then, yeah, all at once.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there has been some discussion on what saves us money, whether we make it wide enough, that ramp, that gangway going down to the drive down, make it wide enough to make a sidewalk on it also, because there has to be some delineation between driving and walking, or just do a separate gangway. So, but,
Trying to think what Sitka did.
Aldi's made it a little bit wider and they have concrete down one side that's wide enough for walkway and then the grid, the expanded metal grid. So there's room that you can walk down and not
yeah.
fall through you have a heel or something like that. But it delineates, right? So you-
Right, yeah, there's got to be a
Drive
delineation, so yeah.
So it's a little bit wider.
Yeah.
That seems like,
How Sitka's is covered. I feel like it's on the same gangway, but there's like a big guardrail and then a cover over the sidewalk part.
just the sidewalk part, kind of like the ferry, like a Hobbit trail, kind of
Yeah.
hamster trail. Well, saving a whole row and preserving the distance between the floats should save us quite a bit of money, which we could use
Was it,
for.
Curtis, you remember what that was, that new L float? Was it, yeah. Yeah. It wasn't enough to make up what we were missing. That's
It was
for
$1
sure.
million.
Yeah, so,
Because moving H over is tight.
If I remember correctly, moving M float, L float, and the sheet piling, we were still short $3.4 million. The paperwork that I saw.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, the problem with putting L with that route is we probably need to make up at least a good chunk of those slips elsewhere, because MARAD will see that as a major alteration to a project outcome, basically, which involves submitting a white paper, which gives them the ability to sit some amount of funds if they think that outcome's worth. So it's not as simple as just locking off the float since we've submitted this drawing. If we find room for other slips elsewhere, which is obviously not easy to do, then you can change your design, but to just significantly reduce the number of slips we've said we're going to build, would probably be a problem.
Yeah, which also changes like the cost benefit analysis too of,
Yeah, but those aren't really the slips that we need.
no?
And we all agreed it was really tight.
It's tight.
It's really tight.
Well, get a bow thruster, I guess.
Everybody has to have a bow thrust.
Person with a paddle.
Yeah. Well, here pretty soon with the gas prices, we're just gonna be paddling everywhere anyway.
You're in it for
But that's a significant, that's 50 feet closer. I mean, that's,
Is it 50 feet?
well, if they're 50-foot slips, it looks like the slip length cuts over about 50 feet closer. And it's already tight.
That would be a great comment or question for tomorrow.
So if we put in more slips on that transient float, I mean, you could pick up 10 or something. If taking those from 20 foot up to 32 foot slips, could that maybe make up some of that? And then maybe extending the 5 remaining piers slightly and then teeing off the ends, that might be able to make us up the exact slip count we need, just, or get us really close
It'll get us real close.
to not be a substantial change.
And it'll allow us to handle the bigger boats.
And it'll allow us to handle bigger boats, which should score us more,
Or even if
maybe, in theory.
score, it'll be better for us. And we really shouldn't
And we already have a
have
pretty good lightering
K-float that
area.
tight over. I mean, there's barely enough room to back out of your slip at low tide. And we don't have any dredge area identified along that part of K-float, so.
Can you walk through those changes? What do you do? You said teeing off the ends, adding slips.
Yeah, so if we were to delete L, add slips to N, I think it is.
different.
I don't think it's labeled, that's just
No,
from memory.
we're talking
We had a map
a new L.
2 years ago that had the numbers on
K-float
them,
now is
or
L.
the letters.
Yeah, the addition.
Yeah, okay. Now I got you.
Yeah.
So yeah, delete L, add slips to N, make all those 20-foot slips 30-foot slips, teeing off the ends, and maybe even squaring the angle, you might be able to gain a couple slips on each finger.
Just about break even if you, by doing that, what you're talking. Yeah.
I think like we'd break even on the slips, but
We get
we'd
longer boats in.
we'd get longer, it'd be like better slips out of it and it'd be a more usable space. We could add a slip over there where G1 is or whatever, you know, right, just 5 feet from the drive down, you could add a slip there. I think you're gonna still wanna keep the G and H floats angled, but if you were to square off the rest of them, you could gain at least maybe, I don't know, 4 slips. Plus the T's. because when you make a tee, you can count that as 4 slips, even if you're only going to use it as 3. You can say it's 4 for the
Yeah, because you can get 2 bow pickers on the outside of it and a bow picker on
right.
each.
So even if in practicality we park one seine boat, we can still call it more than it is, for the sake of the grant application or the grant changing. I think we could get really close to breaking even because there's only 30 slips on that pier. And if the slip count is the one thing that matters, I'm not sure. I'm not a grant writer. But just by teeing every float off at the end, you're gaining 4. So 4, 8.
43.
There's 43 on that one. So if you were to just extend it and put a tee on the end of each float, you'd gain 4, 8, 12, 16 off that, and then you'd gain, you could get up to like 24 by doing the end float slips.
You're not gonna make it, but
We could put, I don't know. That probably
Well,
won't work.
if we move never mind. Yeah, if K's over there, then. I guess also if we're setting up, especially for J and K, I don't know what makes me think of this, but having the docks directly across from each other is more efficient than having them staggered for long-term maintenance. Because those bolts service 2. And it's just, if they're all the same size, then there's no point in staggering them.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, I think by not staggering them, you can gain a slip or 2 per finger.
Yeah.
So there might be a way to optimize this design to be really close. I don't know what constitutes a major change for them. I mean, if we're dropping 10 or 20 slips, is that going to be okay with them? Or?
Yeah, I think you can cite a good reason for the change, probably okay, but yeah, 10 is helpful. I'll hold it 40.
That drawn place of L right now is gonna be very, without any
Big
dredging.
low tide, it might almost sit on the
Yeah,
bottom
it might be
there.
sitting on the bottom. Because there's some of those slips there that it kind of goes in when people are trapped at low tide.
well, on the inside, against the
Yeah.
breakwater side.
Yeah, that's what.
But nobody's tied on that side anyway, or is they?
Well, if you look at where they've got this drawn in here, it's completely inside the ends of the slips of the shadow is the original, or what's there now, the shadow line.
Okay.
So it's over enough that it might be touching.
I think it would be.
And then that's a considerable expense to dredge all that out. And then also we have a main float, unlike G, which has a transient face. We have this one with a goofy edge that's just going to invite people to tie to it that are going to go dry and get screwed up. And it's not a lot of usable. That whole side of what is the drawn L.
So if you were to get rid of that float, would you just have 2 floats over on that side and still have the way through the middle up between those right there?
I think so.
would,
I think the
yeah.
way to the middle is key for using that interior dredge space. Yeah.
I just wasn't sure which float it would be between.
And I think getting those bumped up from 20 to 30s, well, it does make it a lot tighter, especially if we don't get the dredge space right away. That does make those slips actually usable. Right now, they just sit empty. I mean, we've got like 60 slips that just don't do anything. Besides a couple of skiffs here and there.
The inside slips, yeah. Even 25s, it's not a problem for bow pickers to use 25s, if they're nice, tight inside slips like that.
Would squaring all of the slips, would that be an issue, Tony, as far as wind strain, do you think?
I mean, I think the way they're turned now, I mean, even out there now, they take the north wind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's more of a boating question for you guys that, you know, I mean, they all kind of broadside to the wind for the most part.
Not in the big ones, so they're on our nose.
In an east, it's bow in perfectly right now.
Well, I kind of like the slant for the bigger slips because it gives you one side that's actually a little longer than
Right.
the other side. So you can kind of pick and choose a 60-foot slip, all of a sudden a 70-foot boat.
Yeah, you can slide.
Better
a
on
bit
one side
further.
than it does the others.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only downside is then on the other side, 60-foot slip's a 48-foot slip. Yeah.
Right, but you do have different size
Yeah.
boats and you play with them and it is nice to have that.
That's true.
We'll find out tomorrow what the guy thinks about it.
Okay. I'd hate to, any South Harbor project drawing discussions more? The one, what's 5 or why do we have 5? That's showing the parking.
It's only Kenny had mentioned about, there was discussion at one point about putting a roof in a gathering area around the memorial and, well,
Well, I didn't think it was a roof. I thought it was just like a green belt with picnic tables.
yeah.
Still an open space. I think the roof would probably get ripped off. But
Okay.
it was mainly,
So-
what we talked about back in 2018 was doing like 2 food truck stalls and then picnic tables and some like grass. So that way moms and kids and dads and kids and grandpas and grandmas and kids could come down and enjoy the harbor and get a hot dog or something. I guess, that's what I had envisioned with it. There's, in all of the community planning meetings over the last 10 years, there's been people coming in saying, we want to have more access to our waterfront. We want to have the interpretive signage. We want to have a boardwalk. We want to have green space on the waterfront. So that was a way to incorporate that while still getting parking, keeping the statue where it's at and just filling in around it.
On this drawing here is the statue where the square is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I was thinking about is that maybe to move the other section over to the other side of that, since there's only one ramp for all these stalls here now. And that kind of, by having the section right next to the top, that you're moving all the parking places like quite a ways down away from the top of the ramp, and there would be, it doesn't
Plus you've
seem.
got car traffic when you've got people here, move the people over here and make there be more.
Or
Yeah,
put it in the
seems
middle.
like it would make more sense just
Or
to
put it in the middle.
Yeah. That could make total sense, for sure.
So you have parking on each side of it and
Yeah.
for the ramps.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
You have that more of a loading zone there where you can get to the ramp if you're walking down. If you're just hauling something light like your groceries, you don't want to have to walk 2 blocks.
Yeah.
Well, remember the one ramp, you can drive down and drop your groceries off and then park your car and the
you got-
crows will have everything scattered everywhere by the time you
2
get
hours
back.
before they're open, you're gonna have 50 guys want that ramp. Not gonna work.
No, they'll make it work.
Everybody takes off at the same time.
Ramps for the-
Still matters anyway.
Get to your boat.
We're still gonna have the 3-stage, so it's gonna spread the congestion. Instead of right now, it's all on 3-stage. This is gonna make another opportunity, and I think it'll actually be better than people think. I do think we're gonna have to prohibit net mending on it at certain times of the year. And that's,
Or lease a space on it for net mending.
that's my only thing. I mean, could you imagine somebody spreading out a gillnet on the 3-stage, all those bickering matches?
Perfect. Drive on this. No, it's a drive down float.
Yeah,
It's not,
yeah. I like that idea about moving the green space to the other side, though. That makes sense. Keeping the parking close to the ramp and keeping the park in the middle.
I feel like we could, almost kind of, that was one of the main reasons why, I guess, in the beginning, I was thinking that I was hoping that we could make the drive-down dock a little bit bigger so we could have like, half of it could be dedicated to, I just feel like there's gonna be a lot of, you get into like the middle of the gill net season and you're not allowed to put gill nets on there to work on them and stuff. I feel like there's gonna be a lot of people that are upset about that. You know, not having anywhere to do gear work and
Well, it's
stuff
not just the
anymore.
gill netters. You got seiners in the middle of seine season trying to stretch their seines out.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a working harbor. I mean,
It's not gill netter, you could put it back a pickup and drive away and spread it somewhere else, but it's seine, you're gonna have a place right there unless you wanna reload everything onto a trailer and trailer it away somewhere.
if I remember right, it was pretty cost prohibitive to, make the drive-down dock much bigger, Tony.
No. You mean, was it cheap?
Yeah.
No.
No, it was cost prohibitive, I think is
Yeah,
what he was asking.
that's
It
what I
was,
was saying.
we totally could not do it.
Yeah, yeah. Not in the situation we're in right now. Yeah. Yeah, we've actually talked about making it smaller, and I told Mark I didn't really want to make it smaller, but yeah. I mean, we're just looking at all the different options, but
And we don't need that weight capability. I mean, we could have a seasonal float for net mending that we put in.
There's plenty of space there, physical space compared to how far out the old airplane float sticks out there. Like you could put a small floating dock that was, 30 feet wide or something wide enough to do, to flake out a few gill nets on or something there too. I guess you could have
But then you-
for that drive down dock.
then you couldn't use that drive.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
wouldn't be able to use it.
Yeah, it would have to be, it
We-
would
That's why I
have to
was,
be a place that we find that's,
that's why I was saying over where the Forest Service float is. It's the best spot for one.
state mind if we put it alongside theirs?
Just try it.
Otis.
Just try it, see what happens.
Or you just put the Forest Service there and
Is this float that connects from ramp to ramp, basically along that bulkhead? That's part of the plan that's in the plan right now?
Oh, the long one that's right along the parking lot?
Yeah.
M. Is that M? float?
N.
N.
No,
M.
M, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Got too many, changed them all, so.
What
What was the
about,
question? Sorry.
I guess that we're squeezed for space if we're trying to make these other floats 32-foot stalls and stuff, but I wonder if it would be possible to widen that out a couple feet, and then that would be more usable, like, for like gill net work and stuff anyway.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Just make that float double wide and people could pull up to that transient to mend their nets?
Yeah.
It's always a possibility.
It's not a bad idea.
Expensive.
Yeah.
Unless you use some of these old floats you pull off the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get rid of them.
We can just take the existing airplane float and go anchor it somewhere, right?
I don't know if it's gonna stay together.
We're not letting the survival suit race happen. It's so tender.
Yeah.
And that thing's just holding. Really, it's like a mass casualty event for me. When I was,
Tony, do you keep an eye on that? Like, if it's supposed to blow, you go make people untie from that?
Oh, they keep it floating.
Oh,
Yeah. You just have them stand in certain spots too to keep it down.
I mean yeah. I mean the edges look attractive until you realize how shallow it is at low tide, and what would you have in there that somebody. But as far as the actual need for especially a gill net, it doesn't need to have the robustness or the flotation of a commercial dock. It could be a pretty.
Yeah, but if you're gonna make it big enough to put a
Seasonal.
gill net on it, somebody's gonna put a seine on it, and then somebody like me is gonna go put a Sitka herring seine on it because we're assholes, and it's gonna sink. So you gotta make it.
Yeah, we just charge the person that sunk it for a
Yeah.
new one.
Well, that's the thing is, they had to prohibit the herring seines from in Sitka from going on their net mending float.
Right.
You're not allowed to.
'Cause it was sinking.
Because they were sinking the corners.
Yeah.
And at first they made it a rule, you just couldn't put it all in one pile. You had to
Oh,
stack
yeah.
it in at least 3 piles on the dock. And then I think now it's not at all. You have to do it on the drive down. But you can't use the drive down for net mending from like, certain points of the year. They allow you to do it in the spring because the only thing going on is herring.
Right.
But yeah, it's a whole thing. Yeah, it might be where in May and June we don't allow net mending, but the rest of the year it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal, as long to take part of it and allow it. But partition half of the drive down to a net mending area, I'm not sure.
Well, really, gill netters, it's not always convenient, but there's usually a spot that you can pull it off in front of your slip or an open spot down further. I mean, I've moved along to do it on the main float, but you can't do that with a seine.
No.
You need to have some.
It makes it miserable if you gotta run a cart down the floats, though. Hate that.
Getting over everybody's gill nets?
Yep.
Yeah.
You got a power block, not a block, but her batteries, big battery, a couple of them, you gotta drag them down that dock, and you got nets every 5 feet.
You can just go to the drive-down ramp.
That's why
You could run over.
that's why I like parking my gill netter on the seiner stalls, because they don't deal with that.
You just got to change your batteries earlier in the year.
But that would be,
Run
I
over with your old batteries,
Yeah.
and take them off in the ramp, 3-stage.
mean, that is a really nice feature to be able to go to town and flop your net out and move through it and figure out what's wrong and get it straightened back up for a seine boat.
That's where that,
That's we use the Valdez one for seines. That's like the main use of it.
And it's not a problem for the rest of the traffic?
There isn't any other traffic.
Gill netters.
They don't have gill netters. They have some puker boats that are in the other harbor. They have it in the commercial harbor where there's pretty much just seiners and
Yeah.
some tenders.
Well, and
It's-
then the recreational boats don't need it.
yeah, well, they're in the other harbor too.
There's quite a few in that one, but yeah.
Yeah.
If we teed the ends and we made them wider and let them use them,
The ends, use the ends,
Yeah,
and the
that's a
people
point.
that are
Good
tying up
point.
there could dance around. The tees would be good.
It actually
That
would
would
be.
work good for a seiner. Because you could come to the inside and,
seiners or gill netter, I mean, just,
yeah,
if you know that you're on the end dock, that you're gonna have other people on your dock.
not,
as well.
Max isn't trying to get by with his batteries.
no.
Right at the very end.
Yeah, Max and I went
a
out
good
there.
idea.
Won't be doing it too
I
much longer.
wonder what would be more cost effective, doing the widening of those floats or the tees, or doing a dedicated dock over where the Forest Service is. I don't know what would cost more.
Well, if we're doing the tees anyways, and it kills two birds with one stone. It's a win-win. I like that idea. That would give lots of options, and they would be just big enough to do what you need to do, right? I mean, you're gonna work with what space you have, but that's enough room. A 100-foot slip, that's, what, 15 feet wide?
Yeah, but if it's somebody's stall, I mean, it'd be kind of weird, but I don't know
Yeah,
for
but a
the,
100-foot boat doesn't need that much access to get up on their boat, really.
yeah.
Yeah, if you made it wide enough, yeah.
And if you made it wide enough, you could kind of, scab it on the end or something like that and do it.
Yeah, but sometimes with those big crabbers, you're going to be tying across you're going to have a lot of lines. You can't just tie straight down. You don't have the leverage. You have to tie across and tie straight down in order to hold there. So, I know even with my boat, I tie across my finger because I'm so tall. If you tie straight down, you don't,
Yeah, it didn't do much.
it's not going to do much. You just end up ripping like I've done. I've ripped it off in the wind. So, ripped off the bull rail.
Do you know what the width of the main floats are in the design of the New Harbor
8 and
County.
10. G float's 10. The others are 8.
Do you know
All the
what,
others are 8?
do you know what the North Harbor is?
I think they're 8, but no, I think they're 10, but I don't know for sure. I haven't measured them. I verified the ones for R&M the other day, so on this side.
I know we talked about it in the past, and it's a little bit outside of the scope of this project, but there's that big parking lot over next to the leased space between Baja Taco and Andy's shop and the watershed project.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing the Second Street project. Is there a way to piggyback really nice big asphalt pad off of that project when they're already going to be bringing asphalt to town and just making that the net mending, dedicated net mending zone for gill netters? They can bag it, put it in their truck, take it over there, spread it out.
Okay, and then we'll send you down to the dock. You can walk the docks this spring and tell them that pretty soon there'll be nowhere for you to pull up with your boat and flake your net out. You can put it in your truck and haul it over here, unload it, and then figure out how to get it back in your truck again. I would hate to be the guy that.
We don't tell them, they just figure it out
That's-
on their own.
Yeah,
Just stand there.
that's what I
It's not
mean,
good.
that's like what I do that every time I have to mend my net. I never flake out on the dock, take it up to my warehouse. Oh,
I
Just-
can tell you that asphalt is very, very expensive.
yeah.
I think we looked at doing the entranceway to the harbor master office, where it goes up into the backyard where we park the vehicles. I think that one was like $20,000. And it was like 80 feet by, yeah, it wasn't even 80 feet. It was more like 60, 40, I don't know. It was when they were doing Nickoloff, we looked at doing that and they came back with the price and I was like, we'll deal with the dust.
I just was thinking it might be cheaper than a dock, but,
Yeah, I'm not saying it's
Probably
not,
would be cheaper than a dock.
yeah, I'm not saying it's not cheaper.
and you could even put some stainless things in the pad that you could put pillars up to, on a 1 fathom, you know, where you could do a half a stretch of a seine or something too.
Money we don't have.
Just an option.
No, I agree. I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea. I'm just saying, yeah.
It's just, I mean, we talked about it like
Yeah.
6 years ago.
Oh, I know, yeah.
And I think that's when you told me asphalt was too expensive.
Yeah, well, it's not too, just right now, I mean, we're gonna use the savings fund to do this whole project.
Yeah, but rock hasn't changed in price very much.
All the things that are added in.
The 40 by 50 concrete
The
pad.
tar that's gone up.
Yeah.
So, the old business, the South Harbor project discussion drawings, can we bring our discussion items and stuff tomorrow night?
Yeah, I mean, you can ask, so Mark's here, he's gonna answer
5
questions if he can. Yeah,
And as many Harbor Commission members that could be there will probably help as far as.
I mean, it's
helping to-
it's open to the public, so I mean, yeah, if you got a question for him, yeah.
I've got a quick question, I guess. As far as a net mending area, is it something that we could possibly apply for a grant from the Marketing Association to do an asphalt pad to supplement net mending area in the harbor?
What kind of cost is that?
50 to 100 grand?
Probably not as much as 100, but maybe do matching funds or something like that would be more possible.
I don't know.
Because we're also talking about, like, Curtis has a email into me about a month ago about the cranes.
Mm-hmm.
It's on my list, and I just, it keeps shoving down at the bottom of my list, but it's, yeah, I mean, there's money from the Marketing Association that's available for this kind of stuff that benefits the members of the GillNet fleet,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not unlimited funds.
We have that commercial space identified at the North Harbor. Some of that up on the top of the break wall, some of that could be used for net mending,
The what?
or at least until we had something else going on. That's a good spot for it.
How wide's the Forest Service float?
I don't know, that one I don't know.
It's pretty narrow.
It's already there.
It's theirs, they own it.
We can buy it.
Right.
Would that approach dock to the science center be useful? It's kind of a pain. I mean, you could do gill nets on there, but all the wood splinters and stuff would kind of be a pain.
I just feel like realistically for gill netters, we need some kind of a floating dock that's like down close to water level, so you can pull up, like your net off, and then take your net, so it's not a 8-step process to get your net off and mended and in and out of the bag 3 different times. And, like if you had a parking lot where there was like an overhead power block or something for stacking nets in or something like that, that would make it a lot easier, but it would still be a much more complicated process than just having a floating dock to pull up to. I'd support putting the floating dock in that corner. I thought that crane and the floating dock was a good idea for that.
Would that help our application, do you think? Then I would support it.
We would have to do some dredging in order to put that in there.
Yeah, is what we found before, is that the revetment or something, some kind of dredging over in that area, because it gets pretty shallow over in there, narrow. You wouldn't be able to get a seiner over there or anything, so, but yeah. Well, at least I doubt it.
Same boat in there, just to prove to them.
Don't tell them where they can't get us in.
I can pull
You'll be surprised.
It's not a challenge. Not gonna bet you on it. Maybe a pocket seiner, but not.
Yeah, also the thing that strikes me as I look at this photo on page 3 of the whole harbor is that the space at the end of G seems like we're leaving something on the table there.
space at the end of G.
Yeah, where like H goes out further and then G is kind of short.
I think that was mainly for those big tenders to be able to back up. What about E-float in the PID? Is that doable? Does that score us higher?
I don't know about score higher or not, but
Which float?
E, remember how it used to be
Like
pre,
Thorn's old spot out there.
in
In the North Harbor or the South?
the North Harbor
Yeah,
where
the
like,
angled where James is at.
and it just like shot straight out there so big boats could park on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a bit narrower getting to the hoist and everything, but
I think a key component to that, in order for that to work, you cannot have the congestion that we have in that place currently with Cam 2 buying fish there.
Yeah.
That would not work at all whatsoever.
Well, yeah.
My other worry, and granted, I wasn't here when E-float was in there, is that you kind of remove like 2 stalls by putting E-float back in. I mean, you gain 2, but you lose 2, like where James' boat is, and then you lose on the other side of that, you lose that one.
Sound pacer.
So, yeah, so I
Well,
mean,
they could still stay there. They just have bigger boats tying behind them.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying, is you wouldn't be able to really get out when you put the next boat next to it. You couldn't get out of there with that boat. I don't think you can maneuver out of there. Because you got a stall right next to you with another seiner, and then that one there, and if you got a boat up forward and you got a boat behind you.
There always was a boat parked in that stall, though. Like back in the day, Jerry Thorne Sr. used to park there, and he'd park his seine boat in front. He had his big tender, but you couldn't efficiently use every bit of space on the dock because the boat behind you has to leave, a couple feet of space so that you can get in and out. But it seemed like it always worked back then.
Of course, they didn't have bow thrusters and were just better boat handlers then too, so.
Yep. I couldn't drive like they did. I got a cheater stick. I do think that just solving the big boat parking dilemma is a huge priority of mine. So if E-float might be an option to gain a couple more, even if it's just you could park 200 footers there and then do a couple seiners in front of them and leave 20 feet of room between them to get in and out or something. But I feel like we're leaving a lot on the table as a community, especially because you look at the the amount of cost, well, Andy probably knows quite well, the amount of cost with maintaining a 100-foot boat is orders of magnitude higher of that than maintaining a bow picker or a seine boat. Especially some of these old steel boats, the amount of maintenance dollars that go into them every single year is incredible, and that could really help local economy. I mean,
Those
welding
boats-
shops and even they take more crew to handle. You're going to have a crew of 5 or 6 instead of a crew of 2 or 3. That's mouths to feed, people staying in hotels. That's, all sorts of things. If you just get like 3 or 4 of those boats coming out of here, it would make a difference for sure.
Yeah, and they're willing to come too. They're,
Oh yeah, they're looking for places to go because those boats are hard to find places to park because they're so big. And their other choice is running all the way back to Seattle. That's a lot of fuel.
Well, Dave got one in Kodiak, but by accident.
2 of them in Kodiak now.
Yeah.
And a landing craft.
okay, well, a lot of good things there in that discussion. Anything before we move on? Does anybody else have any, or anybody have any last minute?
Are we on
Things that
miscellaneous
were-
business or are we on old business?
Old business,
That's what we did was old business.
or we can switch
Yeah,
to
we
miscellaneous
did old
business.
There is none.
Cranes and Cam 2 would be, I guess that's more of a next meeting agenda item.
Yeah, let's put that on our next meeting agenda
What about them?
for discussion. But
Relocation.
I'm just going to put Cam 2 on it.
Well, I would,
Lane's
I guess,
used for marketing.
application to the marketing association for an additional crane in the harbor basin, taking the crane out of the harbor basin, rebuilding it, putting it on the T-dock for Cam 2 to use. So that way the fishermen get a brand new crane paid for by the marketing association, and Cam 2 can have an old refurbished one. And also reach out to her and see if she's willing to fork up some money to do it. And that way we can get her out on the T-dock and get our docks back for the fleet to use. And I guess it would just shift the wear and tear out to that dock.
It's unsustainable that we just spent so much money there, and in 10 more years, with the way it's going, we'll be doing it again right now.
Yeah, we'll be doing it on the
Hard to
city dock
believe
too.
how much
Oh, yeah.
the
Yeah.
Cliffs.
I mean, either way.
Well, that's why the PIDP would be so great, because if we can get them on the gravel by in there, then it's a lot easier to maintain gravel.
How much does the harbor get from the use of the dock from?
Where we charge them 200 and something a day, right?
Yeah,
That was
charge
30.
for 100 feet.
Yep.
It's
And
$2
It's like
or something.
38,000 a year? Or is that low?
What's that?
It was like 38,000 a year was a line item I saw a few years ago.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't know.
The dockage includes them using the top of the dock, but also tying to the outside dock, so that if you're seeing that line item, it includes 2 things.
Okay.
All right. Takes us to audience participation, which we've had some. Anybody else want to say anything?
I will be coming to these meetings from now on just to provide an additional here. Make sure everything you guys are saying is integrated into the project team and operation.
Thanks, Curtis. Nobody else? Commission comments? Next meeting agenda? I don't know. Want to start with you, Max? Got some comments? for us?
Yeah, it's good discussion and everything until we really get something to work off of really good though. With here gonna bring it into the big plans, the city here and helping. That way these ideas go farther than this around this table sometimes, so if anything can be done, works. We talk a lot about it, but it never gets, sometimes it doesn't get pushed forward, so it never leaves us room, so. But sounds like we're getting closer, I hope. I just think the longer we wait on, especially in the South Harbor here, pretty soon that 32 million isn't gonna be enough to do anything.
It's a serious problem, yeah.
Next year, it might be 50-some million for the same job. So you gotta be careful how long you extend stuff or you just won't have it anyway. That's all I have to say.
Mm-hmm. Krista?
I'm curious about, as far as an agenda item, curious if it's ever, the Harbor Commission ever discusses or looks at receivables or past due receivables from harbor slips that are unpaid, and what the process is. How aggressively do we collect on unpaid or tardy?
Impound notices.
You impounds a bunch of them.
Yeah.
There's an auction every year.
Yeah, we usually have at least a couple boats, or
3 of them in the North Philippines.
I think we had 10 of them up on the board this year. So impound notices. Most people, when they get the orange sticker, pay. So.
Ken?
Thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight. I really appreciate the community participation. Appreciate seeing the shoreside here, and appreciate Curtis coming and giving us a little update on the grant side of things, and appreciate everybody for coming. It's nice to have everybody here and have the full commission present.
Yeah.
And yeah, encourage everybody to come out tomorrow. And kind of like what Max said, I really hope that, we've talked about a lot of these ideas 3 or 4 times now, and I really hope that it makes it outside of this room now and gets included as R&M moves forward with their RFP drafts for people to bid on building this thing, that some of these ideas will be picked up and carried forward. I think it's really important. So, thanks.
I was just gonna say that I thought it was a good idea to look into the old E float in the North Harbor there, and if that could be tied into this project at all, and then also the net mending float over on that bulkhead there were two things that I thought would be good additions, and that's all that I have.
All right, well, thanks all you guys. Thanks everybody for coming. I think our biggest challenge is this inflation, like how far do you have to lead ahead to hit this moving target as we're, going off the rails. That's a real challenge for all of us as we move forward with things, but hopefully the funders will be understanding. Good, well, we got a few things to work on next time. I'm sure we'll look at this again. We'll have more info from
Yep.
Mark.
And more information from Mark tomorrow night. So.
Yeah, that's the whole thing with Mark, is you don't know what you can change at all. You can't
Yeah.
plan, because he's gonna say, well, if you do this, you're not gonna qualify anymore, so you're gonna have to realize what you can and can't do.
Right, we might be making some more specific decisions later as we.
Well, he's looked into a lot of the cost cutting or saving, but not losing any real thing. So he's got a pretty good idea of where we can go or where we can't, so.
All right, well.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.
Dang, I thought of 3 more